Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Cutter Consortium webinar entitled Performing Leadership, Notions on Achievement, Execution, and Inspiration in Contemporary Management, featuring Peter Hanke. My name is Jack Wainwright. I'd like to begin with a few details about our WebEx environment today. To maximize the viewing screen, click on the Maximize button, which you'll find in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. It's the third button from the left with a small red arrow pointing up to the right. When your screen is maximized, a toolbar will appear on the right, and the chat and Q&A features are easily accessed from this toolbar. Though you are in a listen-only audio mode, you may submit questions at any time by using the Q&A or chat tools. If you require audio assistance, please press *0, and should you experience any technical difficulty, dial 866-779-3239. Today's speaker is Peter Hanke. Peter is a senior consultant with the Cutter Innovation Practice. Following several years in theater, Peter established XArt Performances, where his mission is to communicate the experience, knowledge, and techniques of performing arts to stimulate creative gathering in other professions and industries outside of the performing arts. As a result of his successful approach, Peter has been invited to speak and perform in numerous conferences and business development workshops throughout Europe. Peter is also Artistic Director for the Center for Art and Leadership at the Copenhagen Business School, where his research focuses on the aesthetic forces of the arts to develop the idea of inspirational modern leadership. In today's webinar, Peter will explore meaningful comparisons between the organizational culture in a music ensemble with a contemporary organization's need for inspirational leadership and the notion of performance. So without any further delay, Peter, I'll turn this over to you.
Thank you very much, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's highly interesting. I have tried this webinar form before, so please bear with me if something changes that I couldn't expect. Anyway, the headlines you have seen here and also through the introduction, but I would just state very clearly from the beginning that what I want to focus on and what is my main interest with works like this is actually to understand the notion of performance. So anything you will hear today is actually from the origin of the performing artist's point of view, and throughout my research work with the Copenhagen Business School, this is of course also about business. But if we, in any sense, will need more clarification on the terminology and wordings and so on, because the performing arts are not that articulate as the business words and origin would be, please go ahead and discuss this also on the question and answers. It's highly necessary and highly important that we get our notions right in any sense around these factors as well. Well, before I start the slides, I just want to emphasize that I will have these two different approaches. There's performing leader, of course. This is the ground speed is of course about leadership and the performing leader, but also the performing artist as such. That is not only related to the leadership, but also to the employee or anyone who's participating in an organization. And these two different focuses is also important to distinguish between. Not that the performer is not, all these words about prima donnas and whatever we use as prejudices about performers. I regard contemporary human beings to be performers in a very broad sense, and this I would also use throughout this webinar and discuss and argue for. So these two different ways of looking at this will be the performing artist, what I call the corporate performing artist, and also the performing leader. How can they find meaningful ways to work together, and how can we use metaphors, and not only metaphors, but also cross the boundaries of the words and get very close and quite body-wise, embodying the notions and the virtues of the same sort of performance ability that we have here. The form here today, also in the webinar, even if this was a live, not broadcast, but a live together with you as listeners here, we would miss the music, the live music, and the performing ability, and what it does to every one of us when we are together with musicians. So this is also just to state to you that the music part and the aesthetic part of this is also highly interesting and highly valuable in this sense. And this is, of course, also the idea or the fact that our ideas and what is turning everything in modern business, that we create ideas around ourselves, this is highly connected with the idea of the aesthetic judgment. That's why we have been so successful with the Center for Art and Leadership and all the effort we have done there, that we actually combine the creation of ideas and the new values in business and in any organization, that this is now the fuel for the value assets and these things that we work with in our companies. And how to understand the idea making is closely related to our experience by the aesthetic judgments. And this sort of connection I hope also to be able to underline, if not prove to you, that these things are certainly some of the methods or the path into the idea making, that how a leader can actually enable people to work with this on a basis where you gain ideas. So that's the preamble for this, and now I'll get through with the slides, if it works. Yeah, these perspectives of the achievements and execution and so on, the headlines, don't take it too much for granted. I wanted you to hook on it also in order to you could say, massage your idea of what performance is, what all these words we use to create results and add value and look at stakeholders' demands for measurement and so on. I want you to emphasize the understanding of performing, actually the idea of perform. I think that the way we normally use these performance metaphors and words, it's not a business word. It comes from the artistic world, the performance or performing art, which means we make a comparison that is now, until now, has been embedded in the post-industrial notions. How do you create results? What comes out of the pipeline? And I think the way of using the words actually limits us in the way we understand the real value and the depth of performance. I won't get further into this critique. I will just claim that it is like this, and the comparisons would be more fruitful to look at if we go to the source of the idea of performance, and that means the performing arts. One thing can be interesting to look at as well. You are, of course, aware of in any modern organization that social responsibility and effects on the environmental surroundings and so on, life fulfillment and things like that, you will take this into consideration in your work and the way you feel responsible as a leader or in an organizational entity. But I will argue for also to add passion to this. This will not mean that we exclude any idea of social responsibility or all this, but that the knowledge-based idea on performance is completely connected with your passion and your aesthetic judgment. Does it look good? Does it feel right, what I'm doing right now? Do I work with a certain idea of a beautiful result? This sort of beauty content of my job, my work, my deed must be just as balanced as the notions we talk about with rational and ethic standing points. I will come back to this in a more methodical way, but just now, for now, please understand my point of view that we need to emphasize the passion-based effort and the way of getting this fulfillment and content in our lives, both at work and anywhere else, but especially at work. This is not really used in a way where it makes sense for both leaders and employees. So, the two headlines that I mentioned in the beginning. It's highly interesting to look at the way ideas are created and how do we inspire people rather than control them. You will see that I create this distinction between the inspiration and the control. Normally, control could be related to trust or things like this, that we allow people to do things. I think that this is a slightly artificial way to put it. which means that if we step out of the post-industrial ideas about organization as such, control will restrict inspiration. And the way we actually can control, the way we can inspire ourselves will also be the way we inspire other people. And I will focus on two different notions, the corporate performing artist and the performing leader. And let's begin with the broader view on the performing artist embedded in the corporate surroundings. It is provocative opinion, but it's nevertheless true. We cannot pay away anymore. It's quite clear that the content and the need for life fulfillment when people work is clearly that money must have something else on it. Of course, a nice salary is essential for anyone, and also in a nice, you could say, row of jobs, a career like as such. We also look at that. We want to get better pay for the next job. That's obvious. But in the way we work in an organization, we certainly need to get other sorts of reward, and that's also a difficult job actually for modern leaders. We need more recognition of what we actually contribute within our organization, and this sort of recognition can have many different colors and answers to it. It's not necessarily something that we need to have impact on the other than the surroundings in the organization as such, but it has huge resemblance with how a performing artist likes to look upon an audience and the way you perform towards an audience. You want to be surrounded by people that you have impact on, that listens to you, not in this way of a deal of listening. I hear what you say, I will take your opinion into consideration. No, this listening ability I'm talking about is actually an aesthetic sort of recognition. Does it sound good? Am I not just right, but do I persuade, convince, and have impact on other people's way of looking at me? So I conclude on this, I admit, very short analysis that people want to be treated like artists. We want to have acknowledgement for what we create. And please note this creation. This is not just groundbreaking inventions. Creations are also on a very small level tiny bits of impact in the surroundings you have every day. This sort of acknowledgement is quite important. And we want to have aesthetic impact on our surroundings with reference to this money is not enough for the reward. And perhaps the most important part, we want to reach an audience. And people actually do this all the time. You will find many different ways in society where this happens, and I will give a few examples. There are certain theories on the combination of a producer and a consumer. This has, of course, to do with the way you understand the customers in the future, that they want to participate in the product much more than we used to or have been that. This is a trivial kind of remark. This is not new for any one of you, I would suppose, to listen to this. But the fact that you can actually also have this perspective in your organization is not that common idea or knowledge that this will work. But consider that you, as a leader in an organization, will employ a person which is also a deliverer or a consumer. You don't really distinguish between who actually delivers the product and who delivers the pay. What is the difference between these two notions? But you certainly have a producer-consumer perspective on the same idea. So that sort of idea overall can be merged into the idea of describing an employee desire. You want, as an employee, to have impact on the company, not only products, but processes and ways it actually can sustain your feeling of freedom in the way you work with it. And even clearer picture you will get here. You know, of course, how people will rebuild their cardboard for the third time this year, or upload endless videos on YouTube or other sort of portals where you can actually share not only your thoughts but your very essence of who you are with other people. There's a certain tendency of what I call a little provocative also amateur night. I regard the amateur wave of movement to be of a hugely honorable deed and effort in the society as such. But it's also clear that these sort of talent searches has gone into a sort of perverted limbo of only news and without content. And I think that organizations could professionalize these tendencies in a very meaningful way. If we invite the same sort of ways and tendencies by aesthetic longing and desire into the organization, we will get both life fulfillment, content, and new ideas to be promoted by the individual that can participate, and we actually gain the same sort of ideas and fuel for company innovation on a level that we haven't seen before. Imagine the force that you find in YouTube in your company instead. How could this sort of fantastic effort and fantasy be added to a business perspective and be kept in a way that it actually can add things to our heritage as such and not just disappear next week when something else interesting happens on YouTube? I have nothing against the same thing. I want to underline this. The entertainment part of YouTube or anything else is highly interesting also, but I want to look at this not as a business, but as a tendency and an effect in our society as such. So, if we combine this or get closer to the artistic virtues, I want just to show you what I think about this if I look at from this from the inside of the artistic virtues and how a performance artist would look upon his own deed. We are extremely loyal as performers to the task, the plan. Whatever it's a score, musical score, or it's a play, or it's a film manuscript, whatever it is, we really put our soul into this. And that sort of loyalty is deeper than a non-performer will imagine. It is actually, it's not only a business plan, it is touching some religious kind of notions as well. We are in a special way loyal to what's happening there and what we need to achieve with it. It's not completely transferable, but I just want to focus on this, that these things can be beyond metaphors. It's not only the way that we think we want to copy this, but it has a certain force in it. Throughout the communication no matter what sort of performing arts we're talking about, but especially in my field as a classical trained musician and the orchestra or the choir, the ensemble that is working together, the transparency in this sort of organization is actually extreme. We can monitor everything's happening, and we can do it simultaneously. There's a fantastic satisfaction that you can actually hear when people are doing things right. You can feel the flow of both emotion and technical virtuosity throughout the ensemble also on quite long distance. And this sort of transparency is a huge inspiration for anyone I'm talking with on this level, that you actually are able to follow, monitor, look at processes, add to it, and play with it in a way that is not normal, or you could say we restrict ourselves in a more traditional setting that we don't actually aim at this sort of transparency. And it's, in an artistic sense, it is not that dangerous. If you combine it with the loyalty towards the task, which would be the score, it is not, you are not especially vulnerable when you create this transparency. It can be, of course, you could say, work on your vanity. That's something else than vulnerability, in my opinion. And you have to get rid of a certain amount of vanity that's perhaps not that interesting for people in other surroundings as well. But that's the price we pay for being transparent on this level we're talking about here. And the reward when we reach a certain goal is fantastic, and it's of course, also inviting for anyone who's monitoring it. More technically, we could also talk about some issues that are pretty clear in what an artist will aim at and what we can define as virtues. In the music especially, we are working with timing. We are actually getting pretty perfect at understanding timing and inclusion, that I want to have my fellow musicians to participate here. In my role as a conductor, mainly, it's of course also something I instigate myself and create this timing, but you can certainly add anyone who is participating in the workshop or in the music making activity is just as responsible for getting the right timing and include people in what they're doing. This is also, of course, true for any other sort of performing artist's activity. If you look upon the timing of a screenplay, you will see a much more flexible part, but it's certainly also what is not said during this sort of timing that's also pretty interesting in that situation. Of course, we're also searching for the authentic expressions. I haven't talked very much about the searching idea here and what it is. We claim that the performing arts are, in that sense, taken for granted here. But the authentic expressions, this idea of authenticity is, of course, also extremely important, and we need to understand this as well. The truthful expression, the truth about what we call the loyalty that I put on before in the first line you see on this page. The loyalty towards the task is, of course, combined with this search for authentic expression. I'm not completely sure how this can be transferred into an organizational surrounding, but we have this sort of rightness around us. How do we consider things to be right? Does it fit us? And this sort of authenticity on other people's and the company's behalf is, I think, is also comparable. Then you remember in my introduction the understanding of the passion, and this is certainly also something that we need to work on or mention in this sense. If we don't enable the passion in the ensemble of the work we do together, we will not really enable anything around the ensemble. It will be a dull, mechanistic kind of performance. And this is, of course, also quite provocative in terms of modern business. Do we actually need to be passionate about this? Why don't we just copy the great work we have been doing so far, and the sort of the products that we produce, they are, of course, just as they should be. We don't want to change anything in this. My claim will be here that if we don't enable the passion, the new work we're doing, the contemporary work in modern companies, will not work, actually. We'll have to outsource this copying of pieces to countries who work much more efficiently and cheaper with things here. We are working with ideas. Our work will be only now, and also, of course, in the future, that the idea generator will actually create a business around us. And there, the passion of the ensemble will be a keynote, in my opinion, and just taken out from the ensemble's artistic virtues. And something else we also have worked quite a lot with in the work and the research we have done at both the Copenhagen Business School and the company I run now, that is actually how to handle complexity. If you consider a full orchestra performance on stage, you will have something like 98 people working together on different tasks at the same time. How do they actually choose between these millions of different choices they have to do? They are listening and find the aesthetic way. Does it sound right? Does it stimulate my own way of working? Can I put my passion into this? This is solely aesthetic means that we work with on a certain technical level. And when we're talking about professionals and virtuosos in any business, we are getting there with complexity. Any one of you in your business and in your role as leaders, you will have had this experience that some specialists come to you and ask for an opinion, and you haven't got the time or the effort to put into this to understand what it's actually about, and you use an aesthetic judgment to say if this is good or not. It looks certainly good. That's right. You feel your way forward in a way where you use your aesthetic means. And the minute you have admitted this, my comment will be, you need to learn. You need to go to the experts. You need to train your aesthetic ability. Else you will be handling things on an amateur basis. And to just repeat myself of the amateur night at YouTube and Bauhaus before, this is not good for our business as such. We need to professionalize also the aesthetic means we're working with. And what is also pretty significant for the artistic virtues is, of course, that we can perform and evaluate at the same time. It has to do with the transparency that I was talking about also on this slide, but it's also clearly that a musician can do this on the same level. Good. This is, of course, a basis that I could talk with about half an hour more, and this show you also with musical ensembles and examples, also the sounding music. But we need to go on to the clue of this presentation is, of course, related to the performing leader. And I want to, not in depth as this, but just go through the headlines about the performing leader. If you recognize the range of the concept of this corporate performing artist that was presenting here, you'll have to take a few things into consideration. You must become a medium yourself. You cannot just monitor this on top of the hill. You'll have to be a part of the performance. And this is why I don't distinguish completely between this bunch of artists and their leader in front. We're actually a part of it. And I can easily make examples, many examples from my own practice as a conductor. This sort of flow you create around yourself is of meaning in any organizational behavior or situation is fantastic. And you know this also by your experience when this flow is there and when you're a part of it yourself. Become the medium. And what is also quite controversial in many settings, that is the way you distribute your power. You need to give it away. You need to add a generosity act to this and share. It's not that easy to share that power we have as leaders, but it must be done that way in a completely unconditional way to create a shared force. The transparency you heard me talk about before, and this is certainly also something that a leader will have power to do, and it has to do with the same sort of generosity, but it can be also systemized in a way where the decision-making processes will be more transparent than we normally would see in a typical post-industrial environment. And then, this is also my control and inspiration distinction you can see here. We tend to control the specialist too much, in my opinion. And control will in this sense mean restrictions, not beyond their freedom, but beyond their inspiration. They get bored. And what do you do when you get bored at work? You use your effort with something else. So the performing leaders' task number one towards specialists would be to inspire specialists so much so they don't get bored. And this will be by not controlling them. They're actually fantastic. They're expert in controlling themselves because they feel very proud about their work, and they will certainly restrict whatever they need to restrict around themselves, because this sort of pride and honor around your special forces and what you're good at will be restricted in this way, actually more than a leader would be able to detect. That's why inspiration is more important than control. And then also a very important task or setup, we could say, that is the aesthetic ownership. I need to explain it a little, I think. Ownership for ideas, inventions, and so on is, of course, something that is related also to the restrictions around things. But this is not what I'm talking about here. The aesthetic ownership is related to this distribution of power and the acknowledgement around what's happening there. Can you actually see the beauty in whatever process anyone in your organization has contributed with? That's the idea. And this is a more sustained sort of search for the aesthetic artifacts in your company and in your organization, and that you acknowledge who actually owns these parts of it. I need to go into a dialogue with you to understand your own concept of the aesthetic ownership and what could be relevant for another organization. I cannot just guess from this point where I'm here, but I hope you get an idea of what that sort of aesthetic ownership is meant to be. We live, of course, in a competitive surrounding, that's clear. And I just want to emphasize that in the performing arts, the environment is hugely competitive. It exists all the time. But when we combine it with the transparency I presented before, it is also clear that if you combine this with the honesty, of course, also and the transparency, it's clear that the best artist will get the job or will enhance something that is of value for all of us in this situation. So highly competitive and very transparent creates an environment that is tough, of course, but it's also fair. And that's the main idea and what the ideas of the inspiration from the performing arts can add of value to the organization in a broader sense. I mentioned also that contemporary human being wants an audience. This is, of course, also another chapter in a performing arts understanding and a huge and complex embedded way we understand the dynamics here. But the audience is not, don't understand my remark here as an audience in a consumption way. The audience will be listeners, interested people around the same process that I, as an artist, can reveal something new at here. That is the dynamics I'm mentioning here. So, if we round this part up, the excellence of music making, which is of course my field, but it could be any artistic notion we're talking about here. The artistic virtues of reaching that sort of balance between the score. You remember what I said about the loyalty towards the score and the plan. And the musician approach, of course. I need to embed all the musicians I have around myself as a conductor, and also the sounding results, the evaluation that meets our performance. We perform and evaluate at the same time. That is perhaps the most reasonable way of using the artistic virtues as an inspiration for other sort of organizations. And the level of attitude sensing performance you can see here on this slide also is actually also referring to the first point I mentioned about the social responsibility and the ethic parts of what we do. If you add your own sensing, your passion to this, you will reach through the attitude of these ethos around your company or organizational virtues and values. If you add this sort of passionate sensing to it, the performance comes out of that. The performance is not, in this context, related to the rational measurement. It might be also a provocative attitude, but I think it's highly interesting to look upon it from this way, and does at the end add the rational to it. Because the people we are with in our business, they know everything about the goals. We don't have to remind them about this, and especially not when we're talking about ideas. We cannot put pressure on people to get ideas. It's completely impossible. On the other hand, we cannot only just make them play having this free space and not really put any demands on people. So that's the clue here is that by combining with the performing artists both own aims and virtues and pride around the performance, and the company, the organizational attitude, ethos, and the sensing, the passion to this, we will create a performance that, by enabling ideas to a fuller extent than we will by ordering people to do things. And in my case, of course, work smarter, not harder, for the last line on this slide, is of course an exercise that I would love to do with all of you who are listening here, to conduct an ensemble that I use in workshops for many occasions, and you will see how not easy, but certainly possible it is to get ideas of how to work smarter and not harder. We live, of course, in a pretty hard working environment. We live with the Protestant virtues of hard works, digging the soil and see things grow up from there, and this is not bad at all, but it's certainly interesting to look at detours, that is, or smarter shortcuts that can enable ideas and create these aha experiences that we have in many sessions. So I will get a little philosophical in the next part, because I think the ancient Greek and also Roman virtues of rhetoric sense, or the art of rhetoric, has given us a few ideas or embedded some of the fuller European cultural ideology, which is of course a Western notion. It's not only European, it counts for every part of the Western world. This combination of logos, ethos and pathos, the three things to put together in a perfect speech. This is Cicero's way of putting it. That you have the logos, the rational arguments, your perspectives of profession, the measurements, all these logos words we have around us, which our culture at this point is heavily based on, all the measurements. This is of course only one thing about a perfect speech and the balance we tend to need and are aiming at all times. And when it works, we're getting both rational and persuasive at the same time. It can convince people. The ethos is, of course, related to the sort of sustainability that I was talking about in the introduction as well, the social responsibilities, but it's also something that goes very close to yourself as a human being, your personal integrity, your credibility, and your honesty in the way you work with things. What is your own standing point? The ethos, the Greek word, has two meanings, both the home place where you live and your habits. It also converts in Latin into habit, actually. Habitus, that is, of course, what we have as habits. And these two things together, the logos and ethos, has actually been merging for the last 25 years. We are now extremely focused on this sort of sustainability and the ethics around what we do, either in politics, in companies, or where we do it. But just on its way now, the pathos is entering in a very interesting way as well. And it's not completely clear, even I have drawn three perfect circles in this, we might have to actually use the sort of pathos part in another way, that this is not completely clear yet, where the logos and ethos is in place. And that's because it's also difficult for us in the artistic branch to actually add things right here, because the language doesn't exist to a certain extent right now. And that's also the interesting part, that how to create passion and tie the emotional bonds with our audience is actually coming into this play in another way. And I just wanted to present this model because it might have an easier access to divide things into what we have to work with and how we learn on an organizational basis. And then I will show you just here at the end these few models that we can transfer this in other ways, the logos, ethos, pathos, and swap some of the ideas and the notions we're working with. If you use aspirations, the team, and yourself instead, the logos become the achievements, the goals, the objectives of your company. Remember it from here, the logos, and here the aspirations, and how we work that. The ethos, where we call it sustainability, it could also be phrased like a team. You're actually looking upon a team as the ethos of how we sustain our aspirations. And the personal ambitions and your own satisfaction can solely be understood on an individual basis. This is, of course, you. You are the passionate player in this. This is an interpretation, you could say, of how we actually use in a music surrounding surrounding, how we aim at some sort of excellence. The aspirations are a higher goal here, the logos, the rationale, the plan, the loyalty against the score, and we have the team and ourselves in this embedded in the same sort of model. This could be of inspiration for the same work we're doing here. And if you convert that into a corporate development aspiration, you will have more or less the same idea here. The aspirations, the goals, the achievements, and the objectives you can put in the logo part. The organization you can put into the same idea. It will be easy to convince anyone that this will fit very good. But then the excellence that we normally talk about in our setting, and it's pretty difficult to define. I combine this with the pathos and the idea that the personal ambitions and satisfaction is related to this. When do you know when things are excellent? You'll have to do this on a personal basis. Your own personal feelings, emotion around this, your satisfaction, your passion around this will tell you whether you are excellent or not. It is not only measurements if you earn money enough for your company and yourself. The excellence is a much larger notion in this. Let me just repeat these three models. You see the logos, ethos, pathos, but I'm taking from the elements of the antique rhetorics and converting it into the aspirations with you and the team, and here to end with the excellence that I combine with the pathos, the passion of your own personal ambitions. So let me round up here for this part. The artistic virtues, which I call this work smarter, not harder, when we need to generate ideas. We have the loyalty towards the task, in my case the score as a musician. The transparency is added to this. We express our timing and inclusion. We rehearse this at any time wherever we work as musicians. We have this very solid search for the authenticity and the expressions around this. We enable our passion, and we handle complexity with the aesthetic means. Our evaluation can exist simultaneously with our performance. And how do you convert that into your own leadership virtues? Two advices here from my side at the end. Distribute the power you're working with. Get it on with transfer it into a mutually shared force, and use this tool to become a medium of the organizational flow. That will be my end here, the advice I will give you. I hope you have enjoyed some of these perspectives, and I'm ready for questions and answers now.
Okay, thank you, Peter. At this point, we would like to move into the Q&A session. If you would like to ask a question, please type it into the box in the Q&A section on your screen. Peter, we do have a few questions to get started. The first is performing leadership. Does a method exist, and how do you exercise your leadership in this context?
Yeah. Well, you will have seen throughout my presentation here that I'm not very fond of this method, this sort of cookbook thinking that in 5 good advices, how can you become a fantastic leader? And but anyway, as you have seen in my models, that I will not call methods, that is certainly an idea to learn from other sources and to create models around this. And if you allow me to browse through the slides, I think that this rhetoric idea is actually a fantastic model for learning. It is, of course, not invented by only the Greeks and the younger Greek and Roman rhetorics. It's much older than this. It's actually 500 years before, and Plato actually invented ideas like this. And the combination of your ethos, that you search for the good, but you will not know if you have reached it before you have experienced it. This sort of limbo you're in is actually a much more interesting idea of a learning method, and it's not the way you can transform exactly what a conductor will do in front of an ensemble to your own business. It's something you need to reflect on, and you reflect on your own way of monitoring this.
Okay. Our next question is, how can a manager control the impact of the work of a corporate performing artist? Are we all a bunch of picky prima donnas now?
Yeah, this is of course quite clear that the artists become, to a certain extent, virtuosos of their own performance, and I would not say that we should of course measure things. Of course we need to get the results, but we also need to be more open to that sort of flow. I think it's a matter of the dynamics of understanding results. The sort of measurement that we say for the next fiscal year we need to perform for this and this, and get the revenue back, and then to a certain extent. And when we have reached this result, when the number is there, we tend to stop our reflections about how we evaluate things. And this I find undynamic. I like to, which is not ended yet. My advice here would be also a sort of reflection. How can you actually get more intelligent measurements here around this sort, and compare this with an artistic view? If you look at the slides that I wanted to focus on the excellence, we know when we have reached something fantastic. It's not difficult actually. It's pretty clear to anyone that we can that this is now performing fantastically, and sort of extra effect will be that we gain a few fantastic revenue. But the excellence is related to this personal passion. So the measurement must be in this origin of the passion. I'm convinced that this is true.
Okay. Our next question is: all of us know that symphony or orchestra performance is highly disciplined, output of the team. How is innovation or creativity built into this kind of performance while maintaining the required discipline?
Yeah, very good question. I mean, if you look upon the virtues of what I presented here before, let's go back to the artistic virtues, that what you're talking about here is loyalty towards the task, the score, the sort of discipline that the composer has put upon you. That is quite clear that this discipline is inevitably important at all times. But if you look at the other things that I put here, the freedom inside this sort of discipline is huge also, and the satisfaction you get when this transparency occurs and when the timing is right. The innovation is around these sort of beyond the sort of symbols and artifacts of the discipline. It's actually, if you have ever been seated inside an orchestra, if you've been together with these performers, you will immediately feel the same sort of power that is around the creation of things here. It can be highly innovative what's happening here. It's not very easy to describe, I admit this. But if you have still on the same slide I'm showing here, you can actually have combine that sort of loyalty I'm talking about here with, this is only one thing. You have this, and I hope you will acknowledge this to be things that can enable innovative practice on that scale as well.
Okay, our next question is, in many cases to inspire a specialist, they need their freedom. How do you integrate this into a project which is more of a controller environment?
Yeah, this of course has to do with what I said about the inspiration. It could be a little interesting to hear more about this question, to be a little more concrete, because integrate something in a project implies that there will be a certain goal with this project, and I think this has to do with the sort of inspiration that a certain specialist must put in action. Will be actually some of the same things that I'm showing still on this slide with the artistic virtues. That you need to know much more about the task. I would say, for this question, you could say that the project, you say task and project in this question, I would immediately challenge the task presenter to be better and more precisely defined on what this task will give of inspiration. This project will actually inspire me as a specialist to work with. So I think it's actually a leadership answer to this will be to reverse the question to phrase the project in a way that it actually inspires as itself.
Okay.
Does it make sense? I can see the question here is put on by a guy, Ron Bridjak. Please reflect on this and put something else on if you reacted on my comments here.
Okay, Peter, we have one more question, and to the audience, if there's any additional questions, we do have a few minutes left, and if you'd like to ask a question, please enter it now into the Q&A section of the screen. Peter, the last question is, what happened to the genuine management? This sounds pretty romantic. How do you measure the results?
Yeah, it's an often posed question that I receive at many occasions when I present ideas like this. Well, the genuine manager is certainly wanted as well. I tend to use the comparison between manager and leader. The manager is the word management evolves from the manege, where it's a French word, where in the middle of the circus you are whipping around the horses. This origin of that word is, of course, in enabling clarity, precision, tasks, and also control, of course. And the leadership is related to the search and the going in front, which is the origin of this word. I always try to merge these two roles, or these two archetypes of leadership types. And for me, as a conductor, these two notions do not exclude each other. They're completely related. Musicians love to be precise. If you can instigate the music in a way which you can begin in a way that everyone can actually begin at the same time, it's such a satisfactory moment. And this cannot be done without a very precise, a very concrete type of management. On the other hand, they also want to play in a way that opens up possibilities. And to combine this, I need to be the other type of leader where I search for the right and authentic expression. That's why, if we browse back in some of the slides here, it's actually exactly the same idea that I did present to you in the beginning. Sorry. Sorry, it's there. Never mind. You understand what I'm talking about. That this sort of the post-industrial notions of the performance, that the old-fashioned genuine manager is related to this sort of industrial thinking. And my idea is not actually to get rid of him. It is to open up for another sort of possibility that you can add to this sort of performance and enable your understanding of performance on a higher level.
Okay. One other question is, how can one inculcate passion in corporate settings opposed to so-called motivation?
I don't really understand that question. What so-called motivation, does that mean that the motivation is something artificial, that we just pose on people, that we are not really searching for what motivates them? There's something sort of corporate pressure we put on people to motivate them, or what does it come? The question writer must come with a few more comments. If you remember my first idea of that we are very careful with the words. I think that, of course, for me, if I elaborate a little on the words, that the passion and the motivation is, of course, completely related and very close to each other. And but motivation can also be driven by other things than passion, surely. So it's It's not excluding each other in this sense, I would say. But the so-called motivation, I need a little more information from the question to be able to elaborate more on this.
Okay. Well, at this point, unless there's any further clarification that anyone would like on this question, I think we should move towards concluding today, Peter. On behalf of everyone at Qatar, I'd like to thank you for participating today. The next webinar in this series will be on August 23rd, featuring Qatar Senior Consultant Jerry Peterson, and the topic will be Risk Management for ERP. You can register for this and other upcoming webinars at the Qatar website. If you have further questions or comments about the content presented in today's webinar, we encourage you to call or email us. We will be sending you an email message containing phone numbers and email addresses for additional questions or comments, as well as a URL where the on-demand recorded version of today's webinar is available. With that, this concludes today's webinar. When you close your browser, please take a quick moment to complete our very short survey so we can get your feedback on today's webinar and any suggestions you might have for future topics. To end this call, simply hang up your phone, and once again, on behalf of Peter Hanke and all of us at Qatar, thank you for participating today.